Nostalgia, a sentimental longing or wistful affection for a period in the past. If you're new to Nostalgia Basketball, welcome. This is a series that goes over previous seasons that a lot of people don't really talk about because they feel like it's just recent, when it's not. This is for new basketball fans that want to learn more about hoops and look back on previous seasons that they haven't learned about before. And this is for basketball fans that want to just re-experience what that was like, remember some things that they don't really remember as much. And if you haven't seen my previous season or series on this, Nostalgia Basketball Part 1, Season 1, 2016-2017 season, I suggest going back. I did 4 parts, going over the offseason, the Eastern Conference, the Western Conference, and then the playoffs as a whole. This is Son of a Sports. Let's get into it. We ended off Nostalgia Basketball Part 1 with the Golden State Warriors winning the 2017 NBA Finals in 5 games. They won 16 games in the NBA playoffs in 2017 and only lost 1 game. They were dominant. They swept through the league pretty easily. 65 wins in the regular season, 16 wins to 1 loss in the playoffs. It was way too easy, and this shocked the league, as you're going to see in this offseason. Like in the last series, I'm going to go through the offseason, then I'll go through the regular season in another video, and the playoffs in another video. So let's start talking about what happened. Let's go through some of the big names that retired. Paul Pierce is the biggest name, but Matt Barnes, Caron Butler, Metta World Peace, Stephon Marbury, and Carlos Boozer were some of the other names that retired during this time. Boozer, Marbury, Butler were pretty much out of the league at this point. Metta World Peace was just wrapping up his year with the Lakers when he announced his retirement. And Paul Pierce, everyone knew he was retiring. He did a retirement tour. If you've seen the Draymond clip, you know. But yeah, those were the retirements. It wasn't as big as 2016, but Paul Pierce is an NBA legend, and that's still notable. About a week or so before the draft actually happened, Boston traded back from the number 1 overall pick to the number 3 overall pick and gave that pick to Philly. Philly was making plans to build around Ben Simmons, who missed his rookie season with an injury, and Joel Embiid, who finally played in his 3rd year in the league and was showing he had very much all-star potential. They were really excited about that core, and they really wanted to add on to it. So they went and traded for the number 1 overall pick, presumably Markelle Fultz. And the Lakers also made a big move, trading their former number 2 overall pick, D'Angelo Russell, to the Brooklyn Nets with Brook Lopez. And in this trade, when I talked about the 2016 offseason, they had Timothy Mozgov. They included that in that trade to get off that contract, and they really just wanted to free up a move so they could draft who they wanted at the number 2 overall pick, a guy that they were connected to all year long. Okay, talking about the draft now, let's talk about Markelle Fultz. Markelle Fultz was the presumable number 1 overall pick. It was pretty much not an argument. Like, I've seen revisionist history recently, actually, where people are like, why did Philly not do that? Why did Philly not take Tatum? Why did Philly make this mistake? And it's not a mistake at the time. It was not viewed as a mistake. It was viewed as, okay, Philly is doing something great here. Markelle Fultz was incredible in college. He was incredible at Washington, and the number 1 pick was already wrapped up by like halfway through the college season. He was really good, and he was a combo guard that had a lot of playmaking ability and a lot of scoring ability. The issues with Markelle Fultz, to this day, no one really knows what caused his injury, what caused his shooting to really just disappear from him. I know people say like a certain syndrome or a motorcycle accident happened, yada, yada, yada. But what I will say is Philly made the right move at the time. The number 2 overall pick, like I said, connected to the Lakers all year long, hometown kid Lonzo Ball, a guy at UCLA that wowed people. And this is another guy that revisionist history is not fair to, because he did not work out with the Lakers. He was traded away from the Lakers after 2 seasons with them. But Lonzo Ball was a special type of prospect. The athletic ability combined with his playmaking talent, combined with some really good shooting in college, despite one of the worst shooting forms we've ever seen from a prospect in terms of shooting, like how it actually would work schematically and how an arm should shoot in the NBA. He eventually changed his shooting style. He eventually got better as a shooter. He eventually became a 40% three-point shooter before the injuries caught up to him. But Lonzo Ball for the Lakers was a very exciting move at the time. At number 3, the Boston Celtics picked the kid from Duke, Jason Tatum, who y'all know what happened. Y'all know how it worked out. They've won a championship since then, and Boston has gone to another finals since then, and Tatum's been really, really freaking good. And right now, he's number 2 in the race for MVP. And I know the top 3 picks, that's mostly what I was going to go through, but I want to talk about some other notable names. De'Aaron Fox, who was really good early on, just was really held back by how bad Sacramento's rosters were and how bad some of their draft picks were after that. But De'Aaron, he's an all-star now. He's one of the most clutch players in basketball, one of the best scorers in basketball, and he's been electric. And then you move on to someone like Donovan Mitchell, who is one of the best players in basketball as well. He's been insane since the moment he was drafted. And we'll talk about more about Donovan Mitchell in the regular season video, because we all know how his rookie year was. It was unreal. And then finally, the other one I want to talk about, Bam Adebayo, another really, really good player that became great for the organization that he was drafted by, and has still has so much potential. The sky's the limit with Bam every year. And then finally, I'm just going to talk about the draft before I talk about a draft night trade and, big notable trades that happened right after. I mean, we already went through Fultz, Ball, Tatum, Fox. And then after that, the other names like Donovan Mitchell and Bam Adebayo. If you look down the list, I mean, there's some other names in there. Malik Monk, Jonathan Isaac, Dennis Smith Jr., and Frank Ntilikina. They offered their services during certain points of their tenures in the career. Luke Kennard still kicking it in the league. John Collins. You can still look down the list. Jared Allen, OG Anunoby, Kyle Kuzma, Derek White, Josh Hart. These are big names that ended up being big deals in the league, and they still are big deals in the league. These guys aren't very old yet. I mean, they're 26, 25. They still have a lot of time in the league if they still have some skill to them. And yeah, I mean, this was a very interesting draft. And this draft, people look back on it, I mean, it doesn't offer a lot of star power, but it offers a lot of role players that are still kicking it in the league. Speaking of draft night, let's talk about some trades and talk about what has happened because of this Warriors finals win. Jimmy Butler got traded from the Chicago Bulls. They decided to move on in a new era, and he got traded to the Timberwolves for Zach LaVine, a rising player that just tore his ACL after a year where he was showing a lot of scoring potential and a lot of potential in general with that Wolves' previous big three. But the Wolves decided to move on after his injury, and because they wanted a win-now player in Jimmy Butler. Chris Dunn, a former first-round pick that did not work out for him, and the number 7 overall pick, who turned out to be Lauri Markkanen. If you know Lauri, he was not the player at first that he would eventually become, but we'll get into that later. Jimmy Butler was heading to a new place, and no one really saw it coming. Everyone saw a trade coming, but it was more likely than not the Cavs or the Celtics. That was the two that was really rumored, not the Minnesota Timberwolves. Then, right before free agency, a sign and trade happened where Chris Paul was going to go to the Rockets from the Clippers, and a big deal that would sign him to an extension with the Rockets and send over a ton of players to the Clippers. Patrick Beverley, Lou Williams, Sam Decker, Montrezl Harrell. Those three of those names, because of their tenure with the Clippers. And I think another first-round draft pick and maybe some even more players in consideration. I forget how it all worked out, but those players eventually from what happened with the Clippers. Chris Paul was going to form a big two with James Harden in Houston after James Harden almost won MVP the previous year, and it shocked the league there too. And everyone was wondering, how would that work? James just moved to point guard like I talked about in that series, and Chris was one of the best point guards of all time. How was this going to fit? Then another notable move, Avery Bradley to the Detroit Pistons. I know this doesn't sound like, okay, why would this matter? But it was because Marcus Morris, a guy that was known for his tenure in Boston and I guess a little bit in New York and Clippers after. But yeah, they wanted to free some money. Avery Bradley was an iconic Celtic for a while. He was a big deal in Boston and did a lot for him. And he was still one of the better defensive players in the league. Just his age was catching up to him. And eventually he started slowing down. But Avery still had a bag to him. And it was a big deal Detroit was trading for him. But the biggest point of this is Boston was freeing up some money for a potential big move. In my personal opinion, the biggest move in general from this offseason, actually maybe the second biggest move, Paul George was traded from the Indiana Pacers, where he was drafted to, and got traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And there was a lot of rumors that offseason that he was going to get traded. Cleveland especially. And I keep throwing Cleveland's name around. If you don't remember this offseason, I'll get into it with not the main Cleveland thing, but there was some Cleveland stuff before then. Paul George was also connected to the Warriors and a Klay Thompson potential move, the Lakers, the Clippers. There was a lot of teams interested. But Paul George got traded to Oklahoma City, pairing him with the MVP of the league, Russell Westbrook. And in this trade, Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis, the former first-round pick from the previous year before, were traded to Indiana. And if you remember those two are a pretty big deal, and it actually led to a lot happening later in future years in the league. Let's start going through free agency. Gordon Hayward, he was the big name of this free agency, honestly, and he signed with the Boston Celtics after making his first ever All-Star appearance with the Utah Jazz. And there was a lot of recruitment with Gordon, especially between Boston and Miami. And if you don't remember, Miami actually had signs of him throughout the town with him in a Miami Heat jersey. They really did want him, and the city of Miami wanted him. But he decided to sign with Boston and really pair up with a team that just had the first seed in the Eastern Conference and a team that was really looking like they could build on something. Paul Millsap was next. He left Atlanta after they struggled and lost to get in the first round, and he went to Denver. Denver was a growing team with a young up-and-coming Buck and Nikola Jokic and rookie Jamal Murray. I believe he was a rookie. And it was exciting because Paul Millsap had some game left to him, and Nikola Jokic was one of the most exciting players to watch in 2017, despite not making the All-Star game. After losing in the finals and really struggling to build on a defense throughout the last season, Cleveland went and signed Jeff Green. He was a guy that was always a reliable defensive option, especially in Orlando, and a better scorer. Then they went and signed former MVP Derrick Rose, who was still decent in New York, coming off a decent year in New York, plagued by injuries. I mean, he was plagued by injuries for years, but Cleveland was excited to see if he could be the backup point guard and fill that role they were desperately looking for in the previous season. Then Cleveland was able to sign Dwayne Wade. This is a little bit after what happened with Cleveland, but Dwayne Wade got out of his deal in Chicago, after they traded Jimmy Butler, and Dwayne Wade immediately went and signed with Cleveland, which was really interesting to see him pair up with LeBron again. I also wanted to just do a full what Houston Rockets did because, well, they just got Chris Paul, so they needed to fill up a lot of spots. They still had some money left, so they signed PJ Tucker from the Toronto Raptors, I believe, for a good deal where 4 years, $32 million. He was going to be one of their guys, 3-and-D guys that could really help out stretching the floor because they were still looking to build on what Harden and that group did the previous year. And then Luke Baum-Mute, another guy that they got on a minimum salary that was really interesting to see if he could just be in that lineup, be a good defensive piece while also just providing enough stretching ability that they could capitalize on this two-guard game. And without CP3, JJ Redick decided to move on and go to the Philadelphia 76ers and move on from the Clippers, who were actually just starting a new era without CP3 and seeing what they could be without him. JJ actually fit really well with Ben. I'm just going to tell the future there. But for the Clippers, they also had another free agent who was probably the number one free agent in this class outside of Gordon Hayward. But it was presumable he was going to stay with the Clippers, especially after CP3 left. If you don't remember this time, there was so much tension between Blake and CP. Everyone believed that they were buddies, but then those final 2 years, especially, those injuries caught up to them. They just weren't getting along very well. There's so much there, so much random rumors, and it actually boiled over into the next season. And then with Blake Griffin signing back with the Clippers and renewing on his deal, Clippers also decided to trade for Danilo Gallinari, who was averaging 18 points with the Nuggets. If you don't remember, I already talked about him and his days with Denver and the 2016-2017 season videos. He was really good, and he was still a guy that could contribute pretty good to a team, giving up, I think, Jamal Crawford, Diamond Stone, and a first-round pick to Atlanta. I think at that point, Jamal Crawford decided, okay, I'm just going to go and become a free agent again and go sign with Minnesota. Okay, as we're finishing up this video, I wanted to talk about one of the not little trades. Carmelo Anthony is a big deal, and this was a big trade and excited a lot of people. Let me start with this. Carmelo Anthony and the Knicks were not in a good place. Phil Jackson openly criticized Carmelo Anthony pretty often, and they were talking about trading him, benching him, all the things throughout all of his last year in New York, and it was not great. There was so much drama in New York with that team, and despite having a good start to the year, they just did not finish well. And Carmelo Anthony getting traded to Oklahoma City to pair up with current or reigning MVP Russell Westbrook and Paul George, who they just acquired around 2 months before then. Carmelo got traded there September 6th, something like that. It was like a month out from the regular season. And Carmelo, there was always a feeling Carmelo was going to leave within those last few years, but they finally pulled the trigger. They moved on and got Enes Kanter. Enes Kanter is like the main part of the deal I can remember. Oh, Doug McDermott and a second-round pick. It wasn't for much. New York was waiting to move on, and also Phil Jackson was not going to get anything he wanted in a trade like that. Okay, this is the part of the offseason where everyone remembers. This is the big deal of the offseason. There were so many trades, all of that. That is a big thing. But Kyrie Irving requesting a trade from the Cleveland Cavaliers and actually feeling like he's done with LeBron, that was insane. No one saw it coming. LeBron and Kyrie were together after the finals, like hugging it out, being like, we'll be here again. We'll make it work. But Boston Celtics shocked the league, traded Isaiah Thomas, their heart and soul. Jay Crowder, a guy that was a big deal for that team the previous year, and previous years after that, who they acquired from Dallas a few years before then. Amir Zukic, something like that, Zikic. The Nets 2018 first-round pick and a second-round pick from 2020, and traded it to Cleveland. There were so many big things about this trade. Kyrie and LeBron splitting up. That was To this day, people still talk about that. People still talk about Kyrie and LeBron. People still talk about Kyrie and LeBron possibly reuniting. Kyrie being mad at LeBron. Kyrie and LeBron just not playing anymore was crazy. Kyrie was always going to feel like he was a Cavalier for life. He was the hero to this city after LeBron broke their heart. He was the guy that hit the shot a summer before then. And Boston trading their star, their guy, their guy that was there for them, especially in a time where it felt like there was a rebuild coming. And then Isaiah Thomas comes over and is really good for them and takes them to the playoffs and makes it to 2 All-Star games. But his injuries were not what they were making it seem like. They were way worse than that. And they traded him to Cleveland. And the other thing to note, the big deal as well is the Nets 2018 first-round pick. Everyone knew the Nets were horrible. Everyone knew the Nets were going to be even worse than they were the year before then, and they were. This led to the Cavs having the 6th overall pick in the 2018 draft. If I ever do a Nostalgia Basketball Part 3, I'll get to that. But it was a big deal because the Cavs had another trade piece that they could use later down the road. And Kyrie and LeBron not playing together anymore, it hurt. It hurt a lot of people. It hurt a lot of Cavs fans. It hurt a lot of people in the league that wanted to see the Warriors finally be taken down. And it just felt like, okay, maybe LeBron's time in Cleveland is coming to an end too. Okay, that's the offseason. And tell me if I missed anything. Tell me if I didn't go through something good enough. Tell me if there's something you remember that I didn't even talk about. Because I just want to talk about the major plot points. The Kyrie, OKC going after Paul George and Carmelo Anthony, CP3 going to the Rockets, Blake Griffin staying with the Clippers, Gordon Hayward, the draft. This was a fun offseason. And there was a lot of, okay, what's going to happen? What team is going to have to make a big move to stop Golden State? And it felt like a lot of teams tried. Felt like a lot of teams gave up. It felt like a lot of teams were just, okay, we're going to build for maybe after Golden State. And if there's like one team that I thought, okay, this team is gearing up for war against Golden State, it's the Houston Rockets. And we'll talk about that team in that insane season. And there's so many videos on that season. Anything I talk about in the video about the Western Conference is not going to live up to that. But I will tell you now, I'll go through all of it. I'm happy to work on season 2 of this series. I'm happy to see that, I at least get some of an audience for the first part of that series because I really enjoyed talking about it and going through the past of basketball. Thank you very much. And this is Son of a Sports. I'll see y'all next time.